Good sticks, everyone. Welcome to the Captain Avalanche Fancast, your unofficial source for all things Colorado Avalanche hockey and more from a fan perspective. Hosted by me, Captain Avalanche Corey, and the man who will carry this episode, Dom. Now, we're no insiders. We're not inside the locker room face-to-face with our favorite players, but we hope to create a relatable and welcoming environment because we're just like all of you listening. Fans with a deep passion for the game of hockey, and in this case, the Colorado Avalanche. Everyone, this week I will be pulling from my deep and incredible well of hockey knowledge. Why, you may ask? Well, it's because Wait, no, I said that backwards. I meant to say everyone this week. Wait, what the fuck? What did I even come up with in my head? Anyway, Dom's carrying the episode this week. Why? Because I've been building my house. And let me tell you, if you've ever built a house, especially if it's your own, it is quite the undertaking. So Dom has done me and all of you an incredible service by preparing some fantastic segments this week, some familiar friends, and something new that we've been wanting to do for a long time. So everybody say thank you to Dom in the comments, because he is definitely, most certainly, the reason this episode is happening. I pretty much threw all my notes together in the matter of a half hour, although we knew what we wanted to talk about. So everybody give applause to Dom however you feel is appropriate, but he is going to get us through tonight and give us the same quality you've come to expect from us every single week to the 10 of you who listen on the regular.
Well, thanks, Corey. I definitely did my best. And over here, I think just on behalf of both of us, we work as a team, and everybody knows how life goes. Sometimes we have our ups, our downs, our more available time or not. And how about a round of applause for Corey, like actually like building a house while cleaning out another one and just doing this all.
Oh, no, it's the same house.
Single-handedly,
it's
but
the same. Oh, wait, no, I know what you're talking about now. No, you're talking about the house that I'm living in temporarily. Yes, you're right. I forgot about that part.
Yeah, so the man is just pulling double time in addition to his work and everything. So give a round of applause for our captain, our leader here, who keeps us going, who brings all the energy and the inspiration. Because, you know, I can do my best to pick up the slack in weeks here and there, but without the inspiration, without Corey's idea to start this podcast in the first place, we wouldn't be bringing you this here today. So while the 10 of you who are listening every week might clap for me, I think you should also clap for our man, Corey, here.
Thank you, Dom. I really appreciate it. But I think without further ado, let's jump right into it right away. Anyone who was concerned or poo-pooed on the Four Nations before it even happened and said, oh, the players are just going to treat it like an all-star game, the effort isn't going to be there, you are fucking wrong. And you were proven wrong from the very moment that puck drop happened between the between Canada and Sweden. Oh my God. To say that this has been some of the most, in all of my years of watching hockey, some of the most exciting hockey I have ever witnessed would be a severe understatement. I'm going to be totally frank with you, everybody. I'm not going to say any new revolutionary idea here about the Four Nations face-off that somebody else hasn't already said, but I mean, it's just the truth. This has been nothing short of incredible. Absolutely knocked out of the park by the NHL, and I mean, the players themselves said they wanted this, and man, this has just been nothing short of incredible, truly.
So much fun, so much better than an all-star game. I'm sorry, if you were not watching any of these games, I mean, any of them between any of these teams had something
I
worth
feel bad for you.
something worth watching. I feel bad for you. And what were you doing? Like, if you decided to watch the NBA's like whack ass shit, but like the dunk contest, MacLeod won again, and it's barely even a competition anymore. Oh, half the pros don't even play, so we have to have these young rising stars who are not even all stars play on teams. Oh, and we're only going to play like 1/4 format in 3 hours of TV time that the NBA All-Star game had. 42 minutes was actually spent playing basketball. Here you have not one, not two, but 6 hockey games, full 60-minute plus overtime in a couple scenario hockey games that were played some of the fastest hockey we've ever seen, Corey. Some of the hardest hitting block shots. Guys were selling out and showing that no matter how hard they play in the NHL, they will play that much harder wearing the colors of their country on their back.
I mean, truly, it had Stanley Cup final energy to it. And that I don't toss that around lightly. Just, I mean, yeah, you'll say a game feels like a playoff game. No, this felt like more than that. Every single game, even the USA and Sweden game that ultimately didn't matter. USA was already going to the finals and Sweden was already eliminated. They didn't care. Both teams still gave it their all, even when it was totally inconsequential, because the national pride for each nation runs deep. No one wants to embarrass their country or themselves, but most of all, their country. There really isn't an individual out there with any of these teams. You just hear them talking about that they're playing for their flag, and it's fucking awesome.
Well, and a lot of these guys, Corey, are trying to play for a roster spot next year at the Olympics. I mean,
Exactly.
sure, most of them we would expect to have it locked up, but when you have guys like I think the best example that we might talk about later is Dylan Larkin, who is your do it all Swiss Army knife. He can play on the power play, the penalty kill. He pulls big minutes a game for his NHL team. And instead, he was playing on the fourth line, just happy to be there. That type of buy-in from guys who just know the talent on all the rosters is so good they'd rather just be there and accept that they aren't going to play as many minutes. How about Trocheck for the US, who did not play, or excuse me, Kreider, I'm sorry. Chris Kreider for the US did not play until that game against Sweden that didn't matter. And yet he still went out there to give his all in game 6 of the Four Nations face-off. So it's really incredible to see how humble these guys can be, being able to accept their role and just happy to be out there and play for the pride of their country. And as it came up before, the name on the front of the sweater matters a hell of a lot more than the name on the back. And we thank you, Coach, for saying that. If those who get the reference and know one of the greatest games of all time, but all the players from all four countries really lived up to that this entire tournament.
If I had a nickel for how many times someone has quoted Miracle in some fashion or another, I would be wealthy enough to probably travel and go watch the final tomorrow. If you, again, we've said it a million times. If you haven't seen the movie Miracle, you're doing yourself a disservice. It is just a great movie in general. Even if you're not a hockey fan, it's a great movie.
Oh, it is an amazing movie, and I mean, let's just be real. It is one of the greatest hockey games. It is a movie story based on one of the greatest hockey games of all time. But this movie inspired the actual game inspired so many of these stars of today, and they all were asked some of their favorite quotes from the movie or their most inspiring bits of that for mostly obviously for the United States players, but for players all across the league and across all four of these nations. And the hope is that tournaments like these can help inspire the next generations to keep continuing to join into hockey and to play and really live up to the heart and soul and the spirit of the game.
And I did mean to say, jumping backwards a little bit, my favorite people personally have been like Seth Jarvis and Brad Marchand, who of course have played together off and on a line because they asked for it, but basically saying, Brad, just I would be the water boy if they would let me. That's how badly I want to be there. And I mean, you look at, for example, Drew Doughty also, who was a very late addition with Alex Petrangelo dropping out. He said, literally, I will do anything to be there. And his commitment and his drive to be there, even if he hasn't been the most impactful player on the ice, it shows because of how everybody has played. And speaking of which, just to kind of deviate a little bit, this has been some of the fastest hockey I have ever seen. I didn't even know these guys could get to these speeds, and it's already the fastest game on two legs, and yet somehow they found a way to make it even faster. I think that first period of Canada versus Sweden specifically was just insane motorsport levels of fast.
I mean, you want to talk about fast? Let's get into this one. Not only
Yes.
was it the fastest hockey we've seen, it was also the most insane power play that you teased on our last episode. And they were equally fast. They scored the first goal of the Foreign Nations tournament less than 60 seconds, excuse me, into the first game with only 12 seconds of power play time. 12 seconds of power play time, less than 60 seconds in the game. The best combination of 5 men on the ice for a power play we have ever seen was able to strike gold for Canada to go up 1-0 over Sweden.
And I mean,
Absolutely insane.
it's literally every hockey fan's wet dream. McDavid to Crosby to McKinnon. You you literally can't ask for anything better.
Well, and absolutely, and you're talking about the speed of the game, but how about the other commitment as well? Canada has absolutely sold out as a team. They had
Yes.
25 block shots in this game. Like these, I don't know if you imagine this, everyone, but pucks hurt and they go fast when they hit you. And these are some of the best on the in the game, firing them at you to take and block a shot. It is it is quite painful. And these guys were just selling out time and time again, willing to take those hits and willing to risk injury. I do want to call out a moment because of Shea Theodore. He was
Yeah.
injured, leaving Canada with 5 defensemen for a majority of the game. So when people were worried about if they were or weren't going to be actually willing to play, I mean, unfortunately, that was the first injury we saw of the tournament, and he did exit the tournament after that injury, what appeared to be to his forearm or his wrist. So we do hope that he's okay. Although we hope that the Vegas Golden Knights suffer in his absence because we're
No,
me and
no,
we don't
it's
like the
bad.
Golden Knights.
It's bad. Fuck you, Rico. No, it's bad. It's bad because if he gets injured, he might go on LTIR.
Oh boy.
Although William Carlson is already on LTIR. But we don't need to give Vegas multiple players on LTIR going into the playoffs. That is no good. They found a way to get it away. It's such bullshit. Wow. I mean, granted, I don't want anybody to get injured. And it was so sad because I look at my mom and I say, this is already awesome. I can tell they're first game, mind you. They're putting in the effort. I love this. I just hope that nobody gets hurt. And then, of course, Shea Theodore goes down pretty early on. And the point that it was ultimately made, because there's also a flu bug going around all the different countries' locker rooms. Cale Makar was sick. I know other U.S. players have been sick. It's been brutal, apparently. I've heard that the flu this season has been particularly nasty, which no surprise there. But I think the argument was, and I heard it from one of my other family members, was, oh, I don't like this Four Nations face off. He was the only person I've heard say this, by the way. I don't like it because, players can get injured or they could get hurt. How would you feel if it was Nathan McKinnon or Cale Makar that went down? It's like, yeah, I would hate it. But to me, my argument in response to that is this is these players' profession, right? Not only is this their profession that they get paid for, but they also asked for this tournament. Not only that, but I mean, even though they are playing with more intensity here because it feels like there is more on the line, there's a likelihood that they get injured in any of the games that they play. That's just the nature of the game of hockey. So to me, it's no different than if they were playing any other game. They're just playing with more on the line here. I mean, isn't that what everybody ultimately wanted anyway?
It's a rough game. It is a physical game. It is, as you put it, the fastest game on two legs. Many a time you've said that. That is, it. It's all those things. When you're moving fast, when collisions happen, injuries are bound to happen, and that's at any point. Whether, like you said, it's the regular season, the playoffs, or in a tournament like this. And for those who maybe aren't the biggest hockey fans, but like other sports, how about the world's largest sport worldwide in soccer? Would you rather watch the Premier League where guys aren't really selling out, where they're just there getting overpaid millions of dollars just to show up and to have advertising on their jerseys? Or would you like to watch them play when they sell out for their country and wear the colors of their nation and play against the best in the world? I mean, would you rather watch Ronaldo get overpaid by the Saudis in their league or watch him play for Portugal against Messi for Argentina in the Olympics and in the World Cup? I don't think it's even close. And so if that wouldn't even be close in your mind, if we need to use another sport as a metaphor, this shouldn't be either. And like you said, my final note before I'll pass it back to you here is the players want this. And
Exactly.
yes, they get paid, and we all have the teams that we are a fan of, and we want our teams to succeed. But this is what the players want. They would rather go out there and fight their hardest, play their absolute best for their country. And that should matter most, is that if this is what the players want, if this gives them drive, if this is going to draw out the best play they have in them, we should be encouraging this. and I think the success of this is why we're going to hopefully get a Hockey World Cup. And I don't know about you, Corey, but I'm going to look forward to that every 4 years. And just like we look forward to the Olympics every 4 years, probably even more than the playoffs, because it's less often, and it just, the players, it matters so much more to them, and so it really should matter more to us as fans.
I genuinely cannot even express to you how excited I am for the Olympics next year. Mostly because we'll be able to see more teams. Like, I really want to see the Czechs get a chance to play. I really want to see the Germans and the Slavs get a chance to play. So, I mean, there are some absolutely monster
Swiss.
rosters. Yeah, the Swiss team as well, who not only do you get the NHL talent, but you get other national talent from around the world coming in to all play together. Because, of course, there's not enough German players in the NHL to make up a full roster. So you get to see not only these teams that have strong national pride who want to represent their flag and their country, but they're also injected with that NHL talent who can finally make their way back to the Olympics. I can easily say that, especially after watching these four nations, that these next Olympics are going to be some of the best that we've probably ever seen in terms of ice hockey. So it's going to be absolutely incredible. And what's great is now that you have the 2028 World Cup of Hockey coming up, despite the fact that we won't get to probably see guys like Crosby in it anymore, we'll start to see the next generation be included in this World Cup of Hockey, like Macklin Celebrini and Connor Bedard and some of these other up and coming superstars, Lane Hudson, and then whoever maybe comes after here in the next couple of years throughout the draft. So it should be really exciting as the older generation starts to shift into the new. It should be honestly really great.
It really will, and I mean, Macklin would love to play for Canada. He said so himself. I cannot wait to see that. Personally, I will always root for the U.S., but it will certainly make it tougher, and I might have to join you rooting for Canada. Don't tell anybody. But until then, I will continue rooting for the Bash Brothers. We'll get into that more here in a little bit. But I would just like to say one last note for Crosby, because he truly has been doing his best to
My
pass the
God.
torch. He's always been the leader out there on the ice. They won something like 26 straight games that Crosby started for Team Canada that Canada has won. So he really has been the key piece or at the center of a golden generation for Canadian hockey. And he's doing his best to pass the torch. And I think he did a great job. I mean, hell, in this first game against Sweden that we've been talking about, he had 3 assists, including the OT game winner from Mitch Marner. Yes, everyone, if you thought Canada was going to run away from Sweden, no, no, no. Despite being up 3-1, the Swedes rallied in the third period to force overtime, where again, yes, Canada eventually won, but Crosby was spectacular. The whole Canadian team was spectacular, especially for playing with only 5 defensemen for a majority of the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I meant to ultimately say that the reception to this Four Nations has been nothing short of incredible. I mean, people love this. I mean, looking all throughout social media, which I'm chronically online and I like to scroll through Instagram quite a bit. I don't like comment sections, but I have been looking at them a bit more throughout this Four Nations tournament. And I mean, man, people love this shit. I mean, they really love it. And I mean, I really love it too. And kind of jumping back to one of our previous comments, it's the glorious memes that have come out of the fact of people clowning on both the NBA All-Star and the NFL Pro Bowl, all while the Four Nations is going on, has been nothing short of gold. It's been so funny. And actually, to quote Kevin Durant here, fans were complaining that there was like a lack of aggression and players weren't actually playing. And I did not watch any amount of the NBA All-Star game because I don't care. I don't really like the NBA. Not that I think
Nor
basketball is
should
bad.
you.
I mean, there's definitely a lot to complain about in the NBA, and there's a lot to complain about in the NHL, but there's a lot to complain about in the NBA today. And I've talked to a few like longtime NBA fans, and oh boy, they have told me some stuff. But Kevin Durant himself said, for the betterment of your mental health and just overall well-being, just don't watch the NBA. Hockey is right there, and they play with that aggression that you may like. They also rarely get traded or go to new teams in free agency, so the loyalty aspect is there. Hope that helps. Thanks, Kevin. We actually really appreciate you and telling your 20 million followers to go and watch hockey. That is actually really great. So I'm with that.
It's really great. and really telling when you have an NBA All-Star hosting about the NHL All-Star equivalent game with the Four Nations and talking that up instead of actually going out and showing out because I mean the NBA All-Star game has just been getting sloppier and the lack of defense, a lack of physicality. It's just they're out there playing like a street game without actually even trying. And it somehow managed to get worse this year. I didn't watch it either, but from everything I saw, like I said, it was 42 minutes of actual game time in 3 hours of coverage. So it's just absolutely ridiculous. They should be talking up hockey, and I'm really happy to hear Durant doing that. And I hope other stars, I mean, I know stars from all around sports. I know Tom Brady made a post about it from football, the football world and such. So I really hope that all the stars across all the leagues can continue to rally and build up this great game that we love so much because the guys out there on the ice really do deserve the credit and the attention for what they go out there and do every night.
And that's what we want to do here. Not to totally shit on the NBA. I know I was a little harsh there in a few paragraphs ago, but if you're sick of the NBA and you're listening to our podcast because you've seen a couple Avs games and stuff, come to the NHL. Come watch hockey with us. We would love to continue to foster your passion for this sport and for the Colorado Avalanche or the San Jose Sharks, whatever is acceptable, or whatever team you find yourself liking, although we would prefer that you like one of those two, so long as you don't like the Vegas Golden Knights. Anybody else nearly is acceptable, although there are a few on the shit list that I don't think I can accept. But jokes aside, we definitely want to foster this game. We want to bring more people to the NHL fandom. We love this game, and there's a reason for it. So if you're sick of the fucking NBA, come and watch more hockey with me and Dom. We will be more than happy to have you.
We would absolutely love to have you, and we'd love to have you shit on the NBA a little bit with us because let's be real. When you're paying these guys the amounts of money you're paying them in the NBA, these exorbitant amounts per year, for them to take a veteran rest or a superstar night off, and you don't really have any warning if you go to a game, you don't see any of these hockey players taking a night off or even wanting a night off. How about Brady Kachuk in a game that doesn't matter against Sweden, going out there risking injury and just playing his hardest, like just being an absolute madman out there yet again. So I mean, we have so many examples for hockey where we can talk to where these guys don't want time off. They don't want a night off. They don't want a shift off. They want to be out there and play as much as possible. And that I think it's not that we're shitting on basketball. It's just complimenting the fact that hockey it is a better sport to watch right now. The heart, the spirit, the passion, the love of the game is just at such a higher point than I think most people realize because they don't necessarily tune in to watch.
And to share a quick anecdote with that, actually, um, there was a kid who is a fan of the Philadelphia 76ers, the team that Joel Embiid plays for. And regardless of what you think of Embiid, this kid, was brought out by his dad. He made a sign for Embiid and everything. And last minute, Embiid decided that he would sit out the game. And I mean, this kid was just in tears. There was more to the story as well that was really not that favorable. I'll let y'all look that one up yourselves, but it was just really sad to see. I mean, could you imagine you're a kid, you come out to an Oilers game with your Oilers sign, and it's like for Connor McDavid, and it's like, oh, he's a healthy scratch tonight. He needed a night off. Like, what? That would be insane. You would get your ass kicked on the ice if you sat out a game because like that.
You would get your ass kicked in your own locker room.
You
let alone
would.
The other
You
team.
would. Seriously.
Like,
you are not even
The
kidding.
NBA All-Stars, I mean, not all of them, but so many of the NBA players these days are such divas, and it's just so, ugh. It's just ugh to watch. It's ugh. Just go out there and play for some pride. You're getting paid to play your favorite game that you've been playing since you were a kid. Go play. You don't need nights off.
Thank you, Dom.
Ah.
Anyway, go Nuggets. Nikola Jokic is the clear MVP. Fight me. Anyway, back to hockey. So I know you have some game notes. So first I'll kind of preface with this question, and then I think we can get into the game notes here. Did we overestimate Finland? And then what about Sweden? Obviously, it's no spoiler here. The two teams in the final are the USA and Canada. So I mean, what's interesting about both Finland and Sweden is they both won at least one game. And to Sweden's credit, they were the only team who managed to beat the US. Mind you, it was a Connor Hellebuck-less, rather kind of injured US team, but I don't think that takes away from the fact that the players who were out there were still trying their hearts out, and Sweden was injured all the same. And they still went out there with their third string goaltender and beat the US. So, what does that say for them? And I mean, Finland beat their biggest rival in terms of Sweden. So that was an admirable effort. They just kind of got their doors blown off by both Canada and the US.
Well, I think that that's totally a fair point, and so I were we wrong about Finland? In some sense, yes. I think we were wrong because I expected more
I
offense from
expected more.
Finland, and a lot of the coverage was focused on how that's not Finland's style of play. They are the counterpunch team. They are the team that catches you getting a little too aggressive and punishes you on the counterattack. And that was a lot of the focus. And I think we saw that in game two between the US and Finland. The US won 6-1. And so it really, the doors got blown off with four goals early in the third period. But the Finns actually, believe it or not, led this game early 1-0. And it took the US two periods to end up taking the lead 2-1. So if it wasn't for the US catching fire early in the third, having Hellebuck, who is just the best goaltender in the world today, and the US just being a harder checking team, the Finns were in two periods of that game, and they really lost that game in the span of 5 to 10 minutes. It wasn't like that they weren't in that game. I think there was too much of the counterpunch. But then when you, like you said, Corey, when they come out and then they beat Sweden, when, let's be real, like, they have, all four of these nations really have a lot of talent, and it showed across all these games. Sweden forced Canada to overtime. Sweden and Finland went to overtime. Finland gave Canada a nice scare there, and Sweden actually beat the US. So these are legitimate teams, but I think everyone expected going in. All the predictions were for a US versus Canada final that we can look forward to tomorrow night. And that meant that who was going to get third place between Finland and Sweden was always going to be the case. And so I think personally for me, I give the edge to Finland. Whether or not they have the edge on points and they technically ranked last in this pool, they had the head-to-head win over Sweden. So for me, that is my personal tiebreaker. Is when you're matching up more against a balanced opponent and against their own rival. They have a saying in Finland that I saw in one of the broadcasts. I don't remember the exact saying in Finnish, but it is Finland doesn't need to win so long as Sweden loses. And so when when Finland is able to then beat Sweden and in OT with Mikael Granlund, the former San Jose Shark, who had himself quite the tournament here. In my opinion, that should be the tiebreaker. And so, while we might have been wrong about Finland, I think we were right in that sense.
My counter to your argument though with the USA game is, despite the fact that they led, you need 60 minutes of brilliance to win a game, not 40, and almost and maybes only count in horseshoes and hand grenades. So unfortunately, while that may be true and that they gave the US a run for their money for 40 minutes, they didn't do it for 60. And I mean, to Sweden's credit, they managed to push all three of their games at minimum either to overtime when they were down or had to come back, or they actually ended up winning their game. So Sweden, who I did not think a lot of, honestly, going into this tournament, really had a lot of pushback. They just didn't have the finishing power to end up taking, the dubs that they needed in order to secure a spot in that final. But I mean, credit to them. When they were down in any game, they were never out of it. So I have to give Sweden that credit at least. But unfortunately for Finland, once they were kind of down and out, they were down and out. Although I guess that's not entirely true, because their game against Canada, they gave everybody a real good scare, and it made it very exciting. Well, with that, I'll let you get a bit more into the game notes then, Dom, before I keep spoiling every exciting aspect of every game here.
No, I think it's great, and I think we can bounce between these games in this organic fashion rather than having to cover them in some cookie cutter order. So I would like to say I think you make a good point about Sweden, because I think they were possibly one of not the most defensively sound team in the tournament, but their strength really was their defense. It kept them in games. They were hard on the puck. They put a lot of pressure. That happens when your captain is Victor Hedman as well,
Yes.
playing for the Swedes. So I think they really lived up to what the expectations were for their team. They did not fall short of the mark. And you're right, all of their goals were won or lost, excuse me, all of their games were won or lost by a single goal. They pushed Canada to overtime to start the tournament. And yes, Canada was down a defenseman, but still, this is Canada. This is the team that we talked about scoring a goal less than 60 seconds in with the best power play in history. They went to overtime with Finland, their rival, in a really exciting back and forth game. I don't have the most notes for that one because it was just that. It was back and forth. And since it wasn't this US Canada, it's not this big rivalry that I was focused on. I was saving up my energy for that game later in the day. I was more watching, not so much taking notes during this game, but just enjoying the back and forth, because you definitely saw a lot more physicality in game 3 when Finland and Sweden played against each other. And that was something I guess we would expect. They would play each other harder because of that rivalry. And for those who didn't see it, I think you can go check on YouTube, but players from each of these teams, so US and Canada, were asked to say something good about each other before the game, if there's anything good
I
about those
love
countries.
these
Sweden and
videos.
Finland
Nothing.
were asked the same. Most of the guys for Finland said either nothing or meatballs. I would like to say from the Finland Sweden game as well, Mika Zibanejad, he has family on both sides of the border, so he actually said family, and he was having a grand old time getting to play in front of that united crowd. So despite all these deep rivalries, it can bring people in these nations closer together. And so that was something we're seeing. But I do think, as far as just finishing up, wrapping up thoughts on Sweden, I think it's hard. Finland's got, I think they had a bad draw order, having to finish against Canada when Canada's in a much win. They're going to get Canada playing their hardest,
Yeah.
especially after Canada just got.
Lost.
I mean, they lost to the US, and it was a good game. It was a physical game. It was a close game, but that's going to piss off the Canadian team. So they're going to come out with a vengeance, as they did against Finland. So I think Sweden overall maybe had an easier order to things, especially getting to play a US team in the final that wasn't starting Hellebuck, like you said, that Captain Austin Matthews was out, Matthew Tkachuk was out, Brady Tkachuk was injured in the game, missed most of it, McAvoy was out and is out for the rest of the playoff. Like, the US was down a lot of its stars who
Yeah.
played really, really great hockey in that game against Canada, that they had some of the battle scars from it. And so, and again, there was nothing to play for. So those guys who really, I mean, Kreider was a healthy scratch the first 2 games. And yeah, he struck first for the US 1 minute into the game against Sweden on his first shift of the entire 4 Nations playoff. He was able to put the goal home, showing the depth that the US team has, and that these really are all-star players. But what I think I'm trying to get at here is, yes, they might all be all-stars, but when the lines are all jumbled up and a bunch of guys are getting in there or hopping on the ice cold, Sweden's been playing with pretty consistent lines at that point. And so they've had more time to develop chemistry. In such a short tournament, those 1 or 2 games of free playing together makes a whole world of difference. And
Yeah.
so that's maybe where I think that Sweden had just the slightly more favorable draw and how things ended up working out compared to Finland. But you're right. They did finish with more points. They got the win over the U.S., who was the #1 team coming in, who locked up their spot first in the championship. So I think we do need to give Sweden their flowers and acknowledge that they came third in this tournament and earned it.
And I loved Eric Carlson's comments, regardless of what you think of Eric Carlson. I have some definite thoughts on Eric Carlson. But anyway, I liked his comment at the end of his interview, at the end of the game, where he essentially said, "We'll be better." When asked about how Sweden's going to go into the Olympics, he said, "We'll be better." So I can only admire that dedication to bettering yourself, bettering your team, and the drive to overperform what you did here. A couple more notes about the Finns is they were at a disadvantage in the fact that they were missing their top guy in Miro Heiskanen before the tournament even started. And you could say the same for the U.S., but the U.S. has 2 Norris caliber defensemen in the form of Zach Werenski and Quinn Hughes. And Zach Werenski, wow, I'll talk about it later, but Zach Werenski has been an absolute dog for the US. I forget which game it was. I think it was their game against Sweden, but it was just a shot by Werenski, another shot by Werenski. I cannot say his name fast. My goodness. I'm sorry, Zach. I love you. But I mean, Zach Werenski has been an absolute beast out there for the USA. So despite the fact that they're missing Quinn Hughes, I don't. Zach Werenski's stepping up. So my point is, though, is that the Finns, I think, were desperately missing somebody like Miro Heiskanen, who kind of has that Kale McCarr-esque, offensive defensive touch, and honestly, who probably is even better defensively on the puck. So he was definitely someone they needed in the same vein that Canada desperately missed Kale McCarr in their game against the US. You could definitely see it. My other note before we talk more about that, because I feel like there's definitely more to talk about in regards to what I just said, is another video where the Finns were asked if you could have any player from the other team, Sweden, who would you pick? Of course, most of them said nobody. A couple of guys named some people. My favorite response was from Arturi Lehkonen, who said Gabriel Landeskog. So there you go, everybody.
Oh, what a great response. And yeah, you did see in some of those cases where Avalanche players were saying they'd rather have each other. I believe when asked for anyone on the Four Nations, I believe Rantanen said he'd love to have McKinnon on his side again. Those bonds, those relationships are still there for the players, and they do go across country when we see that in the NHL, and they really those bonds from these teams, even when they get traded and move on, and it's not always the cleanest break, they still have a lasting impact. I would like to bounce quickly back to what you said about the Finns, though, because you're right.
Yes.
Miro Heiskanen is an absolute all-star, one of the best defensemen in the league today.
Often
I would
underrated,
say
too. Like,
Absolutely.
severely.
I think everyone thinks Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes. If you're going to pick a guy to be number 3, I think Heiskanen is probably the best candidate to be that offensive defenseman who he can just play really well on both ends. But not only were they missing Miro Heiskanen, and the Finns typically have defense as a strength similar to the Swedes because Jani Hakanpää was out, as was Rasmus Ristolainen. Jesus, that was a tongue twister.
Yeah.
So these are guys that would be 3 of their top 4 defensemen were unable to play at all during the Four Nations, and that's going to have an impact on your ability to play, especially if they're a counterpunch team that likes to stretch out the ice to make quick turns and force 2-on-1 scenarios rather than taking the most shots. They like to be more sound defensively. When you can't fall back on your strength, that's a hard thing that the Finns were a little bit hampered in this tournament. So I would expect them to also be better when we get to the Olympics next year.
Yes.
Other quick notes from the games with Finland before we get to the all-important game, the notes from the USA-Canada match that we all want to discuss and hear about.
Wait, can I interject real quick? Just one more thing about the Finns' defense. Is their defense was stretched so thin. They had a guy who had only played 22 NHL games in his career, whose name is escaping me. He was so random that me, who I think I could probably easily name 100 plus NHL players, I had no idea who this guy was. I saw his name. I was like, who the fuck is that? So not any insult to him. I'm sure he was very happy to be there, but that just tells you how thin the Finns defense was stretched. Anyway, Dom, please carry on.
Was it Juuso Valimaki?
No, it was not Juuso Valimaki. It was somebody else.
Valimaki Vakanainen?
No. I'm telling you.
Haru?
No, I know that name. I'm telling you. It was a name that I didn't even know.
Okay. I was looking at what I could find on their roster, which it's not exactly the most accurate right now because of the injuries. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the Finns had a hard time because when they played against the US is a hard checking team. They hit the most out of anyone in this tournament. They had 32 hits on Finland in the game. So not only did both of the Tkachuk brothers score 2 goals, 2 power play goals and an assist for Matthew, 2 other goals for Brady, they were about muscling the Finns out there and really owned the third period. Like you said, it was only matters in horseshoes and hand grenades, and clearly the US was able to pummel Finland in the span of 10 minutes. But in the Canada game, Canada actually, against Finland, Game 5, Canada ran out to a 4-0 lead with actually having goals from McDavid and McKinnon separated by just 46 seconds early on in the game. McKinnon actually scored a second goal, Corey, to make it 4-0 for Canada. So he was really showing out, having a great game. The whole team putting up a lot of points after only scoring 1 goal against Connor Hellebuck in the US in the game prior. But
Can I
hinted at it while we're finishing up,
how happy I am?
Yeah.
that the Dowd has been showing up in these games, it brings me genuine joy to see Nathan MacKinnon absolutely dominating in these contests. And it pisses me off because they'll still be like, Connor McDavid. Not that Connor McDavid hasn't been great. Okay, I'm rooting for Canada, but god damn it. And then Nathan MacKinnon is like, fine, I will score 2 goals. So you have to also talk about me because holy shit. Connor McDavid scores a goal. Nathan MacKinnon scores it like 2 seconds later. And in the intermission, all they can talk about is Connor McDavid. Yeah.
Yeah, they glaze McDavid too much, I think, and we know this. We don't have to perseverate on it too long because we know
Okay, now
this.
you're
It
stealing
gets
my
annoying
words.
to talk about. I am stealing your word because it's such a good word, and now I know
Yes.
what it means. Because the first time you
Wait,
said it,
did
I'd
you
never heard
not
it
know?
before.
I'm sorry. I just threw a word at you
The
that you
first
just
time you
didn't
had
even
said
know.
it, I had never heard it before the first time you said it and Googled it while we were while we
You're
were
sitting there. What
on
does perseverate mean?
yeah. So and now it's just become one of my favorite words that I have to sneak it in there and borrow your word. Um, but yeah, I think McKinnon deserves his flowers. He deserves more credit than he gets. And I think ultimately, I mean, the fact that they didn't give him the A for the assistant captain
Crime.
when they could have had
Crime.
3, it is a crime, and he's going out there and saying things like this: "The U.S. might have won the battle in that first game, but the war is not over." That's some shit a fucking leader goes out and says. That is a determined motherfucker who is ready to throw down against the U.S. on Thursday night here. So,
If there's
I
anybody
mean,
who does
it's
not
it's
like
gonna be an
losing,
exciting game. Yeah.
there's
Oh, for real.
yeah,
McKinnon hates losing more than anyone. I think he
literally
hates
more than
losing more than he
anybody.
wants to win.
Yes, that is correct. Nathan MacKinnon hates losing so much he'd rather not lose than win, which you would think is the same thing, but no, you don't understand.
No, no, no.
Nathan
They are
MacKinnon
not the same thing.
despises losing. I mean, that guy, not only does he want to win more than anybody else, but he also wants to not lose more than anybody else. I have never seen a person who hates losing more than Nathan MacKinnon. The only person who comes close is probably my mom.
Yeah, I still haven't met your mom and that I need to come
Soon.
visit you guys at some point and help out with all the things that you've got going on. But I'm sure I look forward to meeting her because she definitely raised a winner in you. So imagine she didn't want to lose with being just a mom in general. So I send out a shout out and a thank you to her for bringing you as this amazing human to us and raising you to be this all-time amazing hockey fan that you are.
She is the MVP of my life. But I promise I will stop interrupting your game notes because I know you keep trying to do it. And then I'm like, but wait. So I'll be quiet. I'll be quiet.
No, no, no. Don't feel bad at all. I enjoy this. I enjoy conversing with you, and
Eh,
talking about all these things. The notes are there just as guidelines. They're not actual rules. We're here
true.
to talk hockey, and everyone can follow us on the journey, up, down, left, right, wherever we want to go with it, because we're excited and passionate to talk about this.
When you put 2 people with ADHD who love hockey together, this is what you get.
It's and you know what? I wouldn't change a
I
damn
wouldn't
thing.
either.
This has
I'm not
been the
saying that as a
greatest.
negative. I'm not saying it as a negative. I'm just saying with the
And
up,
if
down, left, right. That's how, for everybody, if you ever meet me in real life, that's exactly how it goes, also. And I mean, you could see it in how I've talked. I've had this discussion with a little less noted guidance because what you all don't understand is like I write out everything I'd like to say. Yes, I go off book and we have discussions, but like I enjoy writing it out. I didn't have time for that this week. This is just a full-on organic discussion about the Four Nations face-off. Because really, why would I take notes over some of the most exciting hockey I've ever seen? I've just been enjoying the fucking game, as you well should be as well. Wow, that was a horribly worded sentence, but you all know what
oh,
I'm trying to
don't worry
say.
about it.
It's fine.
I
Carry
know
on.
what you're trying to say. And you know what? You're right. I didn't take most of these notes during the game. I just threw some of these
Exactly.
together, looked up the stats after the fact, just so we had something to point to and we weren't talking out of our ass here because
Always love
we could
numbers.
we could talk about the four nations for an entire episode for
Probably.
hours. Like I could just say, you know what? Let's watch the recording and cover the US Canada game live because I could talk about that one game all day long. So, you know what? They're just here to help guide us and keep us at least somewhat on track. There's no rules to follow.
No.
This is us talking to you with pure authentic love and appreciation for the game for everyone listening, and we hope you enjoy it and take this ADHD journey with us because we know it's a roller coaster, and we hope it's a fun one that has some steep drops, some big highs, and just waves of adrenaline and emotion. But with that, I will bring us back on track to wrap up our conversation about Finland so we can talk about this US Canada matchup and the upcoming rematch, the thing we're excited about. And so really the thing is here is that Canada was up 4-0 on Finland. So while Finland was in most of the game and in close with the US and then got pummeled late, they were getting pummeled early and then actually made it interesting late in the third period. They scored their first goal with 7 minutes left in the game to make it 4-1, and then attempted to rally, pulling the goalie with as much as 5 minutes left on the clock. And it was one of your favorites here, yours truly, always going to hype up Mr. Granny, but Mikhail Granlund scored a goal with 6 on 5 and then proceeded to do it again 23 seconds later. So taking the Finns from down 4-1 to 4-3 in the span of just 23 seconds, all while 6 on 5. Corey, you and I talked about this, but damn, the Sharks should have waited to trade him because the asking price would have went soaring up after his performance in the Four Nations.
Yeah, no kidding. He was a real difference maker for the Finns in this tournament. Again, talk about later. My players of the week this week are actually 4 players of the week. I have 1 player from each country that I think deserves kind of the player for their team so far. And no spoilers, but Mikhail Granlund may or may not be in that spot. He's been fantastic. And I feel bad for Mikko Rantanen because even though he did, set up some assists, he did score a goal. He's been under a lot of scrutiny. I mean, people said he needs to be the guy for Finland, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. He is the most, I think, high profile and talented Finnish player out there besides maybe Sasha Barkov. So it was a high bar, and I think ever since being traded from the Avalanche, he's kind of been in a funk, and he said he wanted to use this Four Nations to work his way out of it, and I don't know if that's necessarily been successful.
Yeah, and I think he's been getting some unfair expectations maybe and some hate that isn't necessarily worthy. Everybody has their ups and downs, their slumps and their successes, and this goes for all the players in the league. Everybody has those periods of time, even the All-Stars. And look at McDavid this year. Everyone loves to glaze McDavid and nobody seems to recognize or want to talk about how much he's in Dreisaitl's shadow, who is in McKinnon's shadow right now in the race for the most points in the league. So it happens, and I think sometimes these high profile players get hate, but I think it's especially when he wants this 14-15 million dollar a year contract. He is putting the spotlight on himself to people are going to say go out there and prove it. So while
Yeah.
maybe the hate is unwarranted, it is a fair call out that, buddy, if you want the money, you got to put the puck in the net.
Yeah.
And that's just the game. There's nothing unfair. That's the business side. So I think if Granlund didn't already deserve the extension, which he absolutely does, I think his asking price just went up by a million or more per year because not only did he have these 2 clutch goals for Finland against Canada, he had the OT winner against Sweden in that rivalry game, was the player of the game, as voted for that Four Nations second game or excuse me, third game on the slate. So he was showing up in the big time moments. He was wearing the A for his country. I mean, he's a consummate pro. He's a former high draft pick who's really he revived his career with the Sharks and is now on a playoff contender in Dallas. And I know, Corey, we both wish that he was on the Avs, if nothing else. But I'm really sad that he's not on the Sharks. And I guarantee you that the Sharks got that first and that conditional thirds. That'll probably be a 4th round pick because Dallas isn't going to win this year. We're just throwing that out into the universe. Um, because if Dallas wins, that means Colorado can't. So, just gonna put that out there.
True.
But so that means they're not gonna make it to the Stanley Cup, and that means it's gonna be a 4th round pick for the Sharks. I think point is the asking price should have gone up at this point, where it should have been a first and a third guaranteed, or maybe even a first and a second with how Granlund is playing. He's clearly gonna be worth that trade, and it doesn't make the Sharks look dumb, but it does hurt a little bit knowing that the return could be better, or that we could still have this guy. The one guy who was going to be representing the entire Sharks roster at the Four Nations is the Sharks spent all of them were away in Hawaii together. So I hope they got a nice reset. since I know we're not focusing on that tonight, but they came into the Four Nations break losing 11 of their last 12. So I hope the team got a reset for the stretch run here. Um, Corey, do you have anything you'd like to add before I wrap up this Canada Finland game and bring us into the USA Canada matchup?
Other than the Stars are now definitely a more dangerous team with Mikhail Granlund, so I'm jealous and terrified all at the same time. But that's exactly what I was gonna say. Let's, I think, wrap up this segment with the US Canada game that we saw and then the US Canada game that we're going to see.
Yeah, so my final note from Canada versus Finland first is it was actually Crosby, the man, the myth, the legend, who put home the empty netter to ice the
That
game
hit was
against Finland.
insane. He laid the fucking boom, man. Like it was
And
insane.
ironically, like Crosby does not lay the boom very
No,
often, but he laid
no,
the
he does
boom
not.
on Granlund himself at center ice and was then able to recover the puck and fire it home. No shot, he was missing it, and Crosby in that moment single-handedly eliminated both Finland and Sweden from the championship game. Even if it's not technically the game winner, it iced the game. It put the game out of reach. So with that, drum roll please for everybody listening as I bring us to first game between the US and Canada rematch pending. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't even know how to start this or where to start other than the fact that have you ever seen a game of hockey and just never known if like you wanted to see was it just the highest intense feeling? What is the highest intensity you have ever experienced? Forget hockey for a minute. Just think in your mind, close your eyes and think about the most intense feelings, emotions that you have ever experienced in your life. And now picture this in Canada, in Montreal, roaring crowd as not one, not two, but three fights break out in the opening 9 seconds of the game. 32 combined penalty minutes are racked up, which is 41%, by the way, 41% of all penalty minutes for the 6 games of the Four Nations face-off. 32 of them came in 9 seconds of US versus Canada. First, Matthew Kachuk, older brother, says, I want to go first. I want to fight first. He drops the gloves on the initial faceoff with Brandon Hagel, one of the rats we talked about for Canada, who would be maybe on their rat line. And Hagel, actually, after Kachuk lands a couple hits, they both have their helmets knocked off. Hagel was able to take Kachuk down to the ice. Then, guess who, Corey? You know who it is. Everybody else, I'm going to pause for a second and let you guess because, drum roll please, if older brother Matthew just went, then nobody else would be going next except for Brady Kachuk dropping the gloves with Sam Bennett, and they were both throwing haymakers. This was a quicker fight of the two, but they were both, it was definitely more physical. The shots were landing. They were just both swinging, no defense worried about, just taking punches and throwing them right back. It was Brady who was able to take down Sam Bennett and get invited with a big handshake into the penalty box by his older brother Matthew. They were both talking to each other. If you get the chance to go on YouTube and listen to the audio from the penalty box, asking each other about the fights and how it was going and just complimenting each other. For Keith Kachuk, the former NHLer, former U.S. Star player who was up in the stands, can we just say the best thing he ever did is be an all-star father and raise these two absolute bash brothers that can bring all of the joy to hockey games. I know, I mean, Corey, you might push back against that, but please tell me, what are your thoughts just before I get to the third fight?
This is actually one of the few areas that my mom and I disagree. I personally like Matthew Kachuk a lot. I like what they bring to the game, even though they're pretty ratty. But man, is he fun to watch? Because Matthew specifically shows up in the big moments. Like, honestly, I'm sure Brady is too if he ever gets to the playoffs. Here's hoping this year. The Kachuk brothers were built for big time hockey. Honestly and truly built for the big stage, the bright lights for moments like these. So it is honestly fucking hilarious to see them get to take over the international stage. The Olympics are going to be very fun with these two involved.
Oh, it is going to be so much fun. And this is some old-timey hockey. This is physical hockey. These guys hit the hardest. They're looking for contact. They're chirping. They will drop the gloves with anybody. It does not matter who. and yet they can still be 20 goals per year scorers. Like that, we don't see that type of thing anymore. We see the guys who are out there, the Ryan Reeves, who are just thrown in the lineup to go be an enforcer, go be a rat, just go be annoying for the other team and be physical. And then you see the guys who are just fancy and playing for goal scoring ability, like guys like Jack Eichel. And then they, when you put, can I just say, when the U.S. coaching staff put Jack Eichel centering the Kachuk brothers, it was about the best thing I've ever seen. Like when we talked like last episode about what we were hoping to see, we said, let's see Austin Matthews in the middle with then the two Kachuk brothers. Well, I got to say, Jack Eichel with all his offensive skill, it was even better. And that's why in their game against Finland, they were able to combine for 5 points. What a number. So but anyway, back to this U.S. Canada game. Just love to see a guy who will drop the gloves like that. The Kachuk brothers really are the Bash brothers from the Mighty Ducks. If you haven't seen the Mighty Ducks, I don't know what rock you're living under and your childhood was sad. Go watch it.
I haven't seen the
Um,
Mighty Ducks.
Corey, we are going to watch the first two Mighty Ducks movies together because you need the culture, my man,
When
and you
I
need the
when I
Bash
come and
brothers too.
visit for a sleepover, we can watch it.
Yes, sounds good. I'm gonna hold you to that. Just go on YouTube and look up Kachuk Brothers and Bash Brothers, and you will just see that it fits. Again, they weren't the only two who fought because it was only a mere 5 seconds later that JT Miller dropped the gloves after a stoppage in play, and his gloves were off, and he was just waiting for anybody from Canada to come up and match him. And Corey, care to illuminate for everyone who that was for Canada who answered the bell?
Oh my god. The problem was that I was carrying things in from outside during the fights. It was Hagel, wasn't it? That fight, or
No,
were we
no, Hagel
referring?
went first.
Okay, no, it was Hagel.
Hagel went
Then
first
it
with
was
Kachuk, then it was
Sam
Brady and
Bennett.
Sam Bennett.
Oh god, who went with? Wait, I thought Sam Bennett went with Miller. Wait, no,
No, no, no.
he fought Colton Parayko, didn't he?
He fought Colton Parayko, who
Colton
has 30
Parayko's fucking
pounds and
huge,
5
dude.
inches. Yeah. Colton Parayko is in like the Dado Chara weight class.
I never knew how
JT
big
Miller,
he was.
okay, so JT Miller stands. Let's actually just Google this really quick. JT Miller is, let's see, loading, if you will load. He is 6'1", 218 is what JT Miller is listed at. Colton Parayko, on the other hand, is, let's see, come on, he is 6'6", 230. So JT Miller was giving up 15 pounds and 5 inches and stood toe to toe with Colton Parayko, who was another one of those guys when we were talking about last episode, who would absolutely be on a Canadian rat line setup as one of their defensemen, probably paired with Drew Doughty in such a scenario. So he's he's a big dude. And JT Miller went with him, and he was happy to go with him. So it was quite the exciting start. I don't think anybody could fully wrap their minds around it. This is really when you started to see all the celebrities and the all-stars from other sports hopping on social media to talk about this game because I think I texted you, Corey, and I said I don't think there could be possibly a better start to this game that I could think of other than if it had been just a full-out line brawl.
Yeah, I'm surprised it wasn't.
But after that, there were actually no more fights for the rest of the game. Believe it or not, everybody got it out of their system, and that's why the refs let fighting go. And this is what fighting does in hockey. We've talked about it before. It's part of the code, especially in this rivalry between these two teams. A lot of players, both from the roster of the past and today, compared it, and just all of the commentating, compared it to the 1996 matchup between the U.S. and Canada. It had that type of spunk and physicality to it. And Corey, this game was quite possibly the best game of hockey I've ever witnessed live with my own two eyes. And I'm not even joking.
Would have been better
It's
if
not
Canada won.
yeah.
No, but I agree.
It was so physical, played with such high speed. Like we've been talking about the physicality and the speed, and then this game just took it to a whole nother level. Like we were outside of the Earth's atmosphere level here with just how insane this was. Hellebuck was amazing again in this game, so second consecutive game allowing only 1 goal per game. He had a GAA of 1 for the entire point 0.1, sorry. Or no, 1. He had a 1.0 GAA for the tournament and a 957 save percentage. So guy was just absolutely defending the pipes out of his gourd. But everything in front of him was mayhem. And I want to recognize my player of the game, despite the Kachucks and the fights, and when you have people showing up with the depth on the U.S. side, when you have Gensel scoring twice, Charlie McAvoy was my player of the game because he absolutely leveled both McDavid and Crosby on multiple occasions. McDavid getting upended and falling like horizontal to the ice, falling a couple feet down. Crosby getting taken out from behind and then given a little extra. And I love Crosby, so I don't love seeing him be dished a little extra. I have a lot of respect for the guy. But McAvoy was not messing around. He had 4 hits in the first period. All of them were either on McDavid or Crosby. And what I think is most important before Corey, I want to get your thoughts. After that massive hit I first said about Charlie McAvoy hitting on McDavid, McDavid stopped carrying the puck into the zone on that left wing or what would have been Charlie McAvoy's right hand defensive side and started dishing the puck as he made his zone entries because he knew he was going to get lit the fuck up by Charlie. He was all business and it was a recipe on how to slow down McDavid. Everyone always wants to talk about McDavid and his speed and how he's just this insane talent. Watch what Charlie McAvoy did in this game. Every NHL defenseman, this is the recipe. Fucking hit the guy, hit him hard when he enters the zone, take him off his feet and get in his head because McAvoy did just that. And in my opinion, was the MVP of this game.
I mean, I really ultimately think it comes down to that national pride. Everybody wants to play for the flag that they represent. And I mean, Charlie is no exception. He wanted to win for the team and he was willing to do whatever it took to get it. Unfortunately, it cost him, a shoulder infection, but man, he really left everything out there and he wasn't afraid of who he was hitting, who it was. Superstar didn't matter. He was hitting anything that moved, especially Connor McDavid. And he wasn't even the only one doing it.
Yeah.
Brady Tkachuk blew fucking Drew Doughty out of the water. So USA was laying the buddy.
God.
To say that their defense was nothing short of impeccable that entire game, it was genuinely an amazing display defensively. Obviously, they won the game offensively as well. But I mean, Canada, I think for the third period was pushing hard to get that puck into the back of the net. But not only did they have to meet Hellebuck if they ever managed to get past the USA defense, but that was the whole thing is the USA defense, I think that entire game was just immaculate, truly immaculate.
Well, and the hitting was coming from everybody too. I mean, yes, Kachuk led the team with 6 hits in this game. McAvoy second, actually, he finished with 5 after that 4 in one period. But how about guys like Matt Boldy, one of the younger guys at the roster at only 23 years old, coming in heavy with 4 big hits in the game himself. Or maybe it was 3. Actually, looking here, it was only 3, while also still having an assist on the night. So everybody was out there, everybody was hitting. It was a full physical performance from the team. And oh my God, the Doughty hit. Like, ladies and gentlemen, please just go. Like, I don't know what the compilation will be. It'll be on YouTube. Just go watch the highlights of this game. But the McDavid hit and the Doughty hit were 2 clean, but some of the most massive hits I have seen just in real time, full speed. Impeccable, amazing. And just one last little, you're right. McAvoy, he paid the price and he's not going to be able to be in this champion game. And it makes me so sad because I was really looking forward to seeing him play again. He deserved to be able to play more. And it sounds like he's going to be expected to miss a couple weeks when he returns to the Boston Bruins because it is such a serious injury. But after McDavid scored first in the game to put Canada up 1-0, he kept McDavid silent. He kept McKinnon off the board. He kept Crosby off the board. Like, the stars of Canada did not get on the score sheet after McAvoy decided, no, you're not going to get past me on my side. He was just impeccable. I mean, but you're right. The defense across the board from the U.S. was absolutely impeccable all game long. And of course, Connor Hellebuck makes it all look easy when he's in net. So I'm really excited for this rematch. Corey, is there anything you would like to add before we start to maybe predict and preview this game tomorrow night?
other than with McAvoy being out, now there's talks of Quinn Hughes being in, except maybe not because apparently he wasn't medically cleared, but except maybe there is. It's a real mystery. So we might see Quinn Hughes in the final tomorrow. We might not see Quinn Hughes in the final tomorrow. We might see someone completely random. I don't know. We don't need to perseverate on it too long, but otherwise, let's just hype up tomorrow's final. If you're not watching tomorrow's final, no, actually, it's today because today is Thursday now. That's right, everyone. If you're listening to this episode in the morning or the afternoon, the game is on at 6 o'clock Central Mountain Time, where we are, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, or it would be 4 p.m. California time, or 3 p.m. 5? Wait,
5.
no. Yes,
5 California,
5.
6
yes.
Mountain,
5.
7 Central, 8 Eastern.
Yeah. Anyway, if you're not watching the game, I feel really bad for you because this is, I think, going to be one of the best hockey games we'll all have ever witnessed because every single game has lived up to the hype. So if you're not watching this game, you're stupid. I'm sorry, but you're dumb. Go watch this hockey game. It's going to be fucking awesome. Nothing more to say there. If it's half as good as what we saw from the last game, it's going to be the best game ever.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see if any fights happen early on because remember, this last game was played in Montreal, in Canada. It was on Canada's home ice, and the US came in there and got the win. This game is being played in Boston. This is hockey capital USA these days. Most of the players on really any of the rosters in the four nations have either lived in Boston, went to college in Boston. Like this is as much as Denver and Colorado is starting to push and has been really winning a lot of hockey championships in the recent years, Boston is where all of these guys have been at some point in time. It is a absolutely insane environment to go for a game. And Corey, the ticket prices for this game are already up at the level of like a Stanley Cup final game 7 for a nosebleed. Like this is going to be sold out. It is an expensive ticket. Everyone is hyped up to see it, and it's going to be a really insane game. I'm happy to say that both Tkachuk brothers, despite their injuries in previous games, are expected to play and be okay. Austin Matthews, who was rested in the game against Sweden, is expected to be fine. McAvoy has been ruled out, so there is question. I've seen some notes about this, and I don't know the exact rules for this, but since the Americans already have 5 defensemen on their roster, Quinn Hughes would be the 6th. He might need to be medically cleared, but maybe not exactly. Like he might have already technically been. There was something I saw about a report, though, for him to be eligible, not only would McAvoy miss the game, but someone else would have to miss the game with an injury to clear a roster spot to allow the U.S. to promote him or add someone that isn't on their available roster. So we hope to see Quinn Hughes, especially since we would love to see him get to play alongside his brother Jack Hughes in this game. That is something we were really disappointed to possibly miss out on in the first matchup. But that is something that it is not a guarantee that Quinn Hughes plays, but I really hope that he does. Because with the loss of McAvoy, I think having the talented Quinn Hughes out there will definitely make up the difference, although it is a very different style of play. And obviously having a healthy Makar for this Canada game for Canada in this game, this game should be better offensively than the last game was. The last game was insanely physical, and it was all about defense and positioning, and it was a close game until the U.S. scored an empty netter. I would expect this game to possibly have a higher final score. Corey, would you not agree with that theory?
Wait. Sorry. Hit me with that one more time. That final thought.
Final thought. So the final score of the first game was 3-1, with one of those being an empty netter. Very focused on defense and physicality, especially with Quinn Hughes being in for Charlie McAvoy potentially and Makar back. Would you not expect that perhaps this game will be higher scoring on both sides?
I'd like to think it will. But I don't know because Hellebuck has looked really good in this tournament. And the only thing I'll say is it will be a crime if we don't get overtime for this game. I've said this about every game, and I have meant it. All of these games deserve to go that extra 10 minutes. So I pray we get overtime.
Although I just wish it would have been 5-on-5 overtime. 10 minutes is a long time to play 3-on-3. So that's my only gripe is if a tournament like this, screw the 3-on-3 nonsense. Give us the 5-on-5.
Yeah.
That's the only thing with everything that we've hyped up for the Four Nations. As we wrap up this whole conversation and segment, that would be my one gripe. Is that only thing I wish they did different.
Yeah, I do think that having a longer 3-on-3 was definitely a right move, but I know what you mean. It would have probably made more sense for it to be 5-on-5, similar to how the playoffs operate. Just because this has such a playoff style to it, so it just would have made more sense. But otherwise, all I have left to say is I'm looking forward to seeing the game tomorrow. It'll be the highlight of
As
my
am
week for
I.
sure. But otherwise,
Yes,
Dom,
as you know, Corey, I have to be at another event. But alas, I will have the game on my phone because I refuse to miss the game, even though duty calls me elsewhere. So I am regrettably going to have to balance those things. Corey, you and I discussed this previously before
yes,
we started
yes.
recording. So sad face, but I don't you worry, everyone. I will be watching and ready to talk about it. Whether the U.S. wins or loses, it's going to be a phenomenal hockey game, and I can't wait.
Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Are you ready to move on to our next fun segment that we have, Dom?
Oh yes, please, Corey. I am excited.
Well, before we do, my actual final words is this. I'm going to stoke the flames. Sidney Crosby's been playing on a line with Nathan McKinnon, and they've had perfect chemistry. And that will make Sidney Crosby realize, maybe I should take back everything I said about staying in Pittsburgh, and I should come and play with Nathan McKinnon on the Colorado Avalanche. It's going to happen, everybody. The connection is real. All right, anyway.
Do it, Crosby. Do it.
We don't want it,
Do it,
Crosby.
Anakin. Make
Eh,
the jump to the dark side.
Why are we the dark side? We're the dark side? I don't
Oh, I
think
don't
yeah.
know.
I know what you're trying to say. Anyway, ahem. This is a segment we've been looking forward to for a long time. The heroes and the villains. The NHL, from times long past up to now, has always been populated by players that are spotlighted in the public eye. Some of these players are highlighted in red, viewed with disdain and sometimes even hatred by the larger hockey fan base. Others are highlighted in gold, a special player virtually no one hates and everyone views as a shining light in the league. Regardless of which light a player falls under, they are infamous all the same. But what is a hero or villain in this game of hockey? A villain, to me, often synonymous with the word rat, a popular term that fans as well as other players like to liberally toss around towards a player who epitomizes certain behaviors that may sometimes and often be frowned upon within the game. But there are different types of players who fit the villain mold and can often do so for different reasons. Reasons such as being an agitator, a player who purposely tries to get under the skin of the opponent, whether that's it or that's through chirping, quick cheap shots, or stirring up trouble after a whistle is blown. They often cause opposing
Emotion.
players. I didn't want to give any examples. Shut up. We'll give examples through what we're about to say. They often
Sorry,
cause
couldn't help myself.
they often cause opposing players to take penalties but avoid taking penalties themselves. The diver, someone who seems to fall just a little too easily when a stick blade makes contact with their skates or whose head flies back hard when a stick barely taps their nose. Diving is penalized, punished, and even fined in the NHL, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Finally, the heavy hitters, literally more prominent in the NHL prior to the 2010s, but still very present today. These are the players who are unafraid to lay their big body anytime and anywhere, whether that's with a big open ice hit or a crushing board along the wall. Their heavy-handed tactics can be big points of contention for fans. Today, we'll be highlighting some of those examples, and it should be noted that all of these players and the way that they play the game can help their team. And many teams say they hate to play against these players, but would love them on their own team. Now, Dom, I'm going to define heroes here as well, but is there anything else that you think I missed in defining what a villain is?
No, I think you did a really comprehensive job of capturing the different types of villains. I definitely focused in on one particular type, as
Oh
you will
yeah.
see for my portion of tonight's segment. But please do continue and explain the heroes for all of us.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to phrase it, I think, in a way for those who are a little less hockey adept. So just kind of things to keep in mind. Heroes can come in a variety of ways, and like the villains of the NHL, come at wow, I phrased this horribly, but they also come in various different forms. They can be the players who rise above in the most crucial of moments. Think Game 7 overtime winners to clinch the Stanley Cup, Alec Martinez. But they can also be the players who overcome and help others overcome. When they are met with adversity, whether that is injury, disaster, or even racism, they rise above it and demonstrate they are more than that through their play and actions both on and off the ice. Or the players who do outstanding work in their communities to help not only bring the game of hockey to others, sometimes to those who it is not as accessible to, but just bettering the world around them through their hard work and efforts. But most of all, a hero in the NHL is someone who brings positivity to the game of hockey and into the lives of the players they play against and the fans who love to cheer them on or even cheer against them. I should say the players that they play with and against. So to clarify there. But yeah, anything else you'd like to add to the hero segment there or hero definition?
I I would just say I think a hero can be a broad term, and it
Yes.
varies from franchise to franchise. Everyone else has their own heroes. Like I have heroes on the Sharks who could definitely be fitting in this category. Who I tried to maybe not talk about specifically tonight and focus on heroes from around the league and from the 21st century. So I would just say the villains are definitely more generally accepted and across the entire league, whereas the heroes can be a little bit more team specific and more
Yes.
room for personal opinion and debate. That'd be the only thing I might add, but I think you've captured it wonderfully.
I definitely think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of the difference. I think villains really are more like league wide, where it's rare to find a hero, and what makes a hero all the more special that's league wide. And you're right, heroes can definitely be more team specific, but I think we definitely have some good highlights here for both those kinds of players. But without further ado, Dom, let's get into your first villain.
Well, I thank you, Corey. I had to do the honors and take the number one villain, pretty much all around well accepted of the 21st century, the biggest rat of them all. Another drum roll. Ah, fuck that, because he's an asshole. Let me introduce to you Tom Wilson. There are many candidates for possibly being the biggest rat of the 21st century, but I think this man stands above the others. He has been known as a monster in fights, but also for laying those big hits on his opponents that you mentioned, Corey. Uh, Oftentimes, he has hit players while they are in very vulnerable positions, such as when their back is turned, or hitting them high to the head, or even sending guys hard into the boards head first with a hit that could be called clean and he was allowed to get away with 10 years ago, but just simply wouldn't fly today. Maybe it's not 10 years ago, but even 5 years ago. They've focused a lot more on concussion safety now. Corey, I know this is an incident that you may recall, is when coming off the bench, Wilson charged in at full speed to hit Nikita Zadorov behind the Avs net. The hit was certainly high up and occurred while Zadorov was fending off another defender, and the former Avs defenseman did not have a chance to pick his head up and thus no chance to protect himself from the vicious hit. Corey, anything to add before I continue about other incidents of
I mean,
Wilson's?
when you talk about all of his incidents here, which I'm kind of looking ahead on your list, I think that is the common theme and why he is so often viewed as a villain is not necessarily because of the big hits, because there's plenty of players that throw big hits, but it's the situations in which he puts himself in where it feels like the people that he is hitting often don't have a chance to defend themselves. And that's a common theme I think we'll find with most of his incidents. The biggest one for me was the Oscar Sundquist hit, which I'll let you talk about here in a little bit.
And I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well, because I know we both watched at this time when it happened. But you're absolutely right, Corey. When we talk about the code and fighting in your weight class and such like that, he has displayed an intent to injure, a vicious need to inflict pain on his opponents, and he has caused many NHL players to miss games due to those injuries from the impact of his hits. He oftentimes will line up guys that are. I mean, Zadorov is someone who has had his moments of being a rat and is a big man himself, so that one was actually a more balanced hit. But there are many times that he has lined up smaller players for the opposing team, which is just beyond disrespectful and goes against the code. It is only because of his size and his ferocity that he hasn't had to pay a bigger price for some of his brazen incidents. But as you said, Corey, Tom Wilson, has been suspended 6 times in his career for offenses that include high sticking. This was for 6 games just as recently as March of 2024 when he had a high stick on Noah Gregor. I believe that's a former Shark. The name is familiar. Not a longtime Shark, but former Shark, fun fact. He has also served punishment in multiple suspensions here for boarding. First 4 games for a hit in October of 2017 on Sammy Blaze, and then 7 games for a hit in March of 2021 on Brandon Carlo. But perhaps the worst of the bunch are his illegal hits to the head. He received a 3-game suspension in May of 2018, excuse me, for a dirty hit on Zach Aston Reese that also led to blood on his wrist. I believe it was a broken wrist where the bone actually might have poked through. His glove was off on the ice quickly, and he also had a concussion. Just absolutely brutal for Wilson to get only 3 games. But perhaps, or no, not even perhaps, the worst hit of his career is the hit to the head, the absolute blind side train going through the head and only the head in September later that year of 2018, the hit on Oscar Sundqvist, where he was originally levied 20 games of suspension, but was able to appeal and have that reduced to 14, which is just appalling to me that that was granted to him. So, Corey, let's talk about the Oscar Sundqvist one, because this one was just one of the dirtiest hits I've ever seen.
I mean, gosh, I don't even know what to really say other than it's one of those things where, unfortunately, being an audio only podcast, we can't really show you the visual. So I encourage everyone to go look up this video. I mean, I think you described it perfectly. It really is like, it's like a train running over a child standing in the tracks. I mean, he might as well have been reduced to red mist. And I forget how much time Sundqvist ended up missing because of that. Oh, gosh. It was several weeks, if not more. Actually, no, I think he might have missed. Now I need to know.
I'm looking it up.
Missed after time.
Sundqvist missed 8 regular season games due to the injury, in addition to the remainder of a preseason game against Washington.
Yeah, that's
so
a
he,
miracle.
Sundqvist sustained a
only
concussion and a shoulder injury from the hit, and of course, the suspension was handed to Wilson.
What pisses me off about it is it was a fucking preseason game. Like, come the fuck on. I understand it's really just your way to get warmies and back up to game speed, but dude, there is absolutely, I think, no fucking reason, first of all, to lay somebody out like that ever. But this game doesn't even fucking matter. It's a preseason game. Why are we going out there just absolutely blowing dudes' heads off? Like, what do you even have to gain from that? Oh no, you won the preseason game. Ooh. That's what I find extra ridiculous about the situation, is the fact that it was a preseason game. Like, come on.
Well, and this isn't even his first offense in a preseason game. Wilson was suspended from 2 other preseason games in September of 2017 for what was called a predatory hit on Robert Thomas, then of the St. Louis Blues. So this isn't even his first offense in the preseason, literally doing something similar, not as bad, but similar just a year prior. And the fact that then they reduced the suspension to 14 games, it's just so frustrating to me when you have this pattern that in between that time, he proceeded to have other suspensions for the hit on Sammy Blaze, for example, then the Zach Aston Reese hit. So not only was he suspended from a preseason game for a predatory hit, there were 2 more suspensions before this Oscar Sundqvist one, and they still granted him the appeal. It's just absolutely mind-blowing and appalling to me. And not only that, but he also has other random incidents that he's been fined for, such as when he kneeing Connor Sheary in April of 2016. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, what are you doing with your knee hitting somebody in hockey? Like, that happens by accident. Knee on knee collisions are the worst. We know this. But kneeing, like he's actively trying to hit somebody with his knee, it's ridiculous. Like, I get it. This is a physical sport. I'm the one who loves talking about the physicality, but there is a right way and a wrong way. And Wilson has always embodied the wrong way of physicality in the sport. And he has this long history of punishment, and yet he continues to make many more questionable and dangerous open ice hits that have received a variety of penalties and sometimes game misconducts despite having no further suspension after the fact. So I in my brain, he has to carry the title for the worst player, the biggest rat in the NHL in the 21st century, Corey. But perhaps your first villain will be able to go toe to toe with Tom Wilson.
Well, just quickly, because I want to make sure we keep this section moving. I think Tom Wilson might quickly be losing his title to some other players because I think for the most part, he's actually kind of calmed it down a little bit these last couple seasons, although his reputation certainly precedes him and guys definitely still try and get involved with him. But he's definitely not as bad as he was back, prior to 2020 in the early 2020s. But I do think there are some players who I'm not highlighting today, unfortunately, but some up and comers who maybe are taking that ultimate the Giga Rat title from him. But my first player is actually not one of this era of hockey players, but one of a bygone era whose name you may recognize. My first villain of the day is Scott Stevens, the legendary captain of the New Jersey Devils. Dom, are you aware of this player?
I am. Doesn't he hold the title for one of the longest suspensions in NHL history?
He may. Now you got me curious. Longest suspensions in NHL history. We're just doing a bunch of lookups today. Let's see. He, off of my initial look here, it does not look like it actually, which is surprising. But to that point, he played in an era of the NHL where when you laid the kind of hits that he did, you didn't get suspended or really even penalized for it. And that's why I never really enjoyed watching any of Scott Stevens' highlights, because really the type of player that Scott Stevens was he went for knockouts when he aimed to hit people. He went for open ice hits and he aimed to do damage. And I understand that it was a different, more physical era of hockey back then. But I think even then he was pushing the boundaries of what would be acceptable. And of course, concussion protocols were not thorough or even understood back at that point in time, as we'll get into with the example that I'll talk about, or the anecdote that I'll refer to here. But that was the Scott Stevens style of play. No skill, all crush. And his goal was to take people out of action. And I frankly do not ever enjoy that way of play. Scott Stevens, pretty much you could point to ending the careers of both Eric Lindros and Paul Kariya. Eric Lindros, briefly we'll touch on, had dealt with concussion issues his entire career and really could have been one of the best ever played. I mean, he was still a fantastic player regardless, but Scott Stevens really did it with one more big, massive hit to the head, and that was it. And when you look at Paul Kariya was knocked out on the ice, truly unconscious. And he should have never came back into that game. And I actually wrote a paper all about it. But Paul Kariya himself said that he didn't remember the next three days after that game. And I will say that the goal Kariya scored is probably my favorite call in NHL history. Off the floor, on the board, Paul Kariya. And you just see Scott Stevens looking on when Kariya comes back on the ice, just licking his chops, wondering how the fuck is this dude still alive. And that's what always frustrated me whenever you see any historical footage about Scott Stevens, is that was his goal, was to hurt people. And I, again, understand that it was a different era of hockey, but I personally don't think that's ever how you should play the game. Your goal should never be to necessarily hurt the other opponent. And that's how Scott Stevens.
100%. That should never be the goal of the game. This is a game. You're not trying to actually actively ruin people's livelihood, their
And he
ability
did.
to live life as human beings. And he did. And so you're right. It was the way the game was. It was acceptable at the time where hits to the head were considered legal and normal. And we've thankfully moved on past that time period. But I was incorrect. You're right. He was never actually suspended for any of his hits. But he was, Corey. If you don't have this, do you know the one suspension that he was given 3 games for?
I do not. Please enlighten me.
So Scott Stevens, I double checked online his suspension, and this is why it came to my mind. He was given only 3 games in his entire career, but it was during a fight he was penalized for eye gouging. So all these things we talk about, drop the gloves, throw the knucks, fine. Man stuck his thumbs trying to actually blind a man. Like you're right, Corey. This is absolutely ridiculous. It is appalling. His desire to injure people. I would say it compares to Tom Wilson and his style, and maybe Wilson does that within the bounds that the game now protects players. But good lord, Scott Stevens was on another level of just absolute rat behavior, just trying to injure and trying to ruin careers. It's a great thing to know that the NHL has evolved beyond such a dark period.
Yes. But that is all I have to say on Mr. Scott Stevens. So, for the sake of keeping it moving, Dom, please enlighten us with your villain number two.
So, of course, this one I have hinted at, I have mentioned many other times, and it's probably not going to be the most widely agreed upon or accepted villain, but I don't care. This villain number 2, we are going to go with Cody Eakin. And of course, I've mentioned it before, but the incident in question involving Joe Pavelski happened on April 23rd of 2019. To set the stage, it is game 7 of the first round of the 2019 NHL playoff series between the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights. There is 11 minutes remaining in the third period, and the Golden Knights are up 3-0. Well, now you know the scene, the setting of what was happening. The Sharks were losing, and they have an offensive zone faceoff. Right off of winning the faceoff, Pavelski was cross-checked up high and was set off balance. And that is when Cody Eakin came in for a second hit that slammed the already falling Pavelski down to the ice. Pavelski, the Sharks captain of the time, had his head hit the ice so hard, causing a large amount of bleeding, and he would actually miss the remainder of the 2019 playoffs. Now, Corey, as you know, this led to a very controversial 5-minute major penalty for the hit, where the Sharks actually came back from being down 3-0 to score 4 goals to take the lead and eventually win the game and the series 5-4 in overtime. While most, including Pavelski, agree that the Eakin hit should likely have been assessed as a double minor instead of a major penalty with a game misconduct, it was nonetheless absolutely unnecessary and appalling to me to see my captain, one of my favorite players to ever play for the Sharks franchise, be brutally cross-checked not once but twice. The second of which, again, he's already been cross-checked up high off the face-off, which is disrespectful and questionable in the first place. But then the man is literally tripping, falling backwards, and gets a stick shoved right into like his neck, shoulder area, and get pushed hard into the ice. It's just, excuse me. It was unnecessary. It was just, it was just disrespectful, for lack of a better word. Like, I know it doesn't really match anything to what we're saying about what Scott Stevens did to an opponent, but this is a playoff game. This is not the time period Scott Stevens played. This is 2019. This is with the concussion stuff and a focus, especially in response to a lot of the antics of Tom Wilson between 2016 and 2018. The league definitely was starting to penalize more these dirty types of hits, and try to get them out of the game. So I just absolutely appalling and unnecessary. As a fan and seeing my captain not able to play anymore and the amount of blood coming out of his head, I don't care if it was the right call to give a major or not. The Sharks deserve that at a minimum. And you know what? We won the game fuck you, Vegas. This is why there's a rivalry. Fuck you, Cody Eakin. No matter where you are, because oh, don't you worry, I have another example that I want to talk about here. But I'm gonna pause a second, Corey, in case there's anything you'd like to add. Maybe a dissenting opinion to the penalty, if you will, because I know I'm biased from the Sharks' perspective.
Nah, I don't want to interrupt this flow. Carry on.
Alrighty, well, there's actually an earlier incident of Eakin's villainous behavior that occurred on December 15th of 2016 when he encountered the great Henrik Lundqvist and went so let's just set the scene again. Lundqvist went to go play the puck behind his own net. This is during a power play, no less. So the Rangers are on the power play. Eakin should not be that close in the first place. Eakin not only went behind the net to go play the puck, which makes no sense when you're already down a guy anyway, I just got to say that, but he absolutely ran the Hall of Fame goalie over, hitting him directly in the head with his elbow so hard that Lundqvist's helmet was launched across the ice and he was sent spiraling. It was another blatant and unnecessarily violent hit on a very well-liked and well-respected player, just like Pavelski is. I mean, Lundqvist is far more liked and respected to this day. And again, like I said, the Rangers were on a power play at the time, so Eakin had no business being that deep into the zone in the first place, let alone hitting the goaltender, and certainly not to the head of all places, with a force strong enough to launch a goaltender's mask off. I mean, Eakin received a 4-game suspension for this offense, and quite frankly, I don't think it's enough for what he did to one of the game's most well-liked players.
I will say, even if you're not done giving examples, you have sold me on Cody Eakin being a villain because, my God, do I love Henrik Lundqvist. I love King Hank, so that instance alone would be enough to convince me that he is a villain. But you have made a very compelling argument for that Sharks Vegas game, in which I was on the opposite end at the time. I was a Sharks hater because, of course, you guys were kicking our ass in the playoffs. So yeah, that's you have maybe swayed my opinions.
Well, I appreciate that because we did go on to play you guys in the next round.
Don't remind me of that part.
Yeah, no, we won't focus on that. I'll pass off to you here so we can keep it moving with your second villain of the evening.
Yes, well, my second villain of the evening is the one, the only, Jamie Benn. Jamie Benn, everybody. That's what I call him because I don't like him. He's a bitch. You're a bitch, Jamie. But once again, just like Scott Stevens, I think I'll highlight two particular anecdotes that I think, as a whole, highlight Jamie Benn's personality, and his actions on the ice. And I do just want to say, briefly here, while we are disparaging kind of these players' actions on the ice, a very common thread is, leave it all out there on the ice. What happens on the ice stays on the ice. And a lot of these guys, whether they're on different teams or not, often get like dinner together before games and are very good family men off the ice and are very good people off the ice, despite perhaps actions on the ice. What would be fun would be to talk about Claude Lemieux, who I did not include in this list and who I also do not like, despite him being a former Avalanche player. But that would be a very, very, very long discussion. But I just want to say, while we are disparaging these players and for their actions on the ice, we are not necessarily trying to disparage them as human beings as a whole. Just want to make that clear. Although I don't know.
Nothing to add. I agree.
Although I don't know, man. With Scott Stevens trying to gouge someone's eyes out, I don't know if he was a very nice guy off the ice either. So
no, I think we can hate on Scott Stevens for the actual intent to injure and the impact he had on others. Well, let's just say I wish it was revisited upon him, be it in the next life or in the next world, if you will.
Anyway, but to talk about Jamie Benn specifically, one, it's honestly hilarious, but there's a video of him and Zach Hyman standing shoulder to shoulder. They have their arms around each other. They're watching a fight unfold. Seems like they're just having a nice conversation. All of a sudden, Jamie Benn picks up his stick and slashes Zach Hyman's out of his hand. And then when Zach goes to pick it up, Jamie Benn just starts beating his ass for no reason. And it's like, okay, bro, I thought we were hanging out. I thought we were friends. Why did you have to go and deceive me? This is fucked up. Why would you do that? So, have you seen that video, Tom?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I've seen plenty of Jamie Benn, and I think it's fitting that you talk about him because he's been particularly rude to Avalanche
Yes.
players over the
Yes.
years. But he's going out there with a scowl on his face, hitting
Yes.
guys hard, just kind of being a dick, instigating or straight up sucker punching guys, basically. I mean, that's what you described. He slashed the guy with no provocation. The guy doesn't respond, and then he goes and sucker punches him. Like, come on, man.
It's not
That
great, but
that's some bullshit.
but
And the man's
the
the captain of his team.
I know.
I hate it. Sorry, continue.
But you're right. And the biggest example, and I want to say we somehow end up talking about this team way more than we should. I don't like Vegas. I really don't like Mark Stone. But man, was this nasty where Jamie Benn, during a playoff game no less, cross-checks Mark Stone from behind. Mark Stone had just come back from back surgery, mind you, or a back injury. Sorry, excuse me. He cross-checks him in the back, and then when Mark Stone falls over, Jamie Benn then comes down onto Mark Stone's lower part of his spine. Completely unnecessary. The initial cross-check was unnecessary, but the fact that Jamie Benn followed Mark Stone all the way to the ground and used his full stick and weight to cross-check him in the spine after he had just come back from an injury to play in the playoffs, regardless of how you feel about Vegas's using LTIR. That's fucked up. And it's one of his biggest suspensions. He was suspended 2 or 3 games here. 2 games for that instance, which it honestly should have been more, because that's how you break someone's back. And that can end their career. That can end their ability to walk. And it was thankfully taken somewhat seriously, although I don't think the NHLPA took it seriously enough. And that's just kind of the thing that he does all the time. Obviously not to that severity. I think that is like the peak of his rattiness, but I think he plays with that kind of edge in every game that he's involved.
Yeah, he has the intent to injure that he has displayed, similar to Wilson and obviously Scott Stevens we talked about. I mean, trying to paralyze a man is appalling, to say the least. But it's not only that, is that he is the aggravator, the instigator out there, where he does not need any provocation. Like we said, he will just go out there and just be a problem just because he feels like it, and if he's having a bad day. So it's the type of thing they're trying to maybe get out of hockey. I endorse physicality in the sport, but there's a right way and a wrong way, and Jamie Benn has more often than not exemplified the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. But that's all I have to say about Jamie Benn. Never like seeing his face on the ice whenever the Avalanche play Dallas, which is, of course, more often than not. So that is it for my villain segment. But Dom, are we ready to move on to the happy part of this segment with our heroes?
Oh, yes, please do, Corey. Take us away.
Absolutely. Well, it's easy to name anybody as a hero, especially for your team. Like, I could say Nathan McKinnon's a hero because of some of the things that he's done in an Avalanche uniform. I could say Devon Taves is a hero because of his charity work with Freedom Service Dogs. There's a lot of reasons that I could name for players being a hero, but I did see in your section, Dom, just some mutual heroes that I think everybody universally agrees and respects, and that's Marc-Andre Fleury and now Sidney Crosby in the twilight of his career. Although I think Sidney Crosby at one point was not looked upon too favorably when he was still a young buck, but I think the respect level for him now, you've seen it throughout the Four Nations, is very high. But the one I highlighted specifically was Marc-Andre Fleury. I don't think there's anybody more wholesome in the hockey community than the Flower himself. I mean, he was the reason that people were a fan of the Vegas Golden Knights. Everything Mark does, he does with an extra little bit of flair. And I remember the other day, or not the other day, but a while back here, I'm not doing my time stamps right here. A few weeks ago, before the Four Nations, he fulfilled a make a wish for a kid. He did goaltending for him. It was so sweet. He stepped onto the ice of a youth hockey practice and, took shots from these kids and made their dreams come true. He is the NHL's most notorious prankster while also being one of the best family men you have ever seen. He dotes on his kids and his wife so happily. Oh my God. He is just, that is the reason that people want to see him play another year. Not just because he is a fantastic goaltender, number 2 all time in wins, 3-time Stanley Cup winner, Jennings winner, Vezina winner, but because of just the person that he is. Dom, what else do you have to say about the Flower here?
I mean, we talk about when we hate on the guys that we don't hate them off the ice so much as on the ice. For Fleury, like you said, we love him on the ice and maybe even more for what he does off the ice, like you said. But I think what you highlighted or the thing I had noted is I would love it if we can tag it in the description or point everyone just go to YouTube, look up the little prank wars between like a compilation of Crosby and Fleury over the years between All-Star games or their time together on the Penguins. He really just went out there trying to have fun with his teammates, have fun with opponents. He's typically super chill, a guy who's not been rattled very many times or moved to anger throughout his career. He's always been the consummate professional. This a person that we should all look up to and be inspired by to be that good at something and to have as big of a heart as he does and just be as kind to his fellow man. So I think you've really hit the nail on the head, Corey. It's hard not to say things that sound so generic and have it be bought by everyone online as you're listening here. But it really that I don't think we can say enough about how nice he is as a human being.
Yeah, just a genuine human being. I mean, I would love to be able to meet him because I'm sure he's just fantastic. There is a reason that he received a standing ovation in his final game in Montreal, not only because it's his hometown, but because of the impact he's had on the game. So there are many reasons that people are lining up to shake his hands after he's played in their arena for the final time this year. He has left an indelible mark on the game of hockey and on all those who have gotten to play with him across an incredibly long and fruitful career. So honestly wishing all the best to him. But Dom, who do you have as your first official hero? Perhaps another goaltender?
Well, of course, Corey, when we think about the 21st century, you cannot mention the Flower without King Hank. You alluded to him earlier, and I mentioned him being on the receiving end of one of our villains. But the New York Rangers legend Henrik Lundqvist is considered one of the best goaltenders of all time. I would go as far as to say top 5. I think easily when you consider Brodeur, Patrick Waugh, and the Flower himself. I think it's just a matter of who's in the 5th slot there, and you can argue all day long about which one is first and which one is 5th. But alas, he is certainly one of the kings, if not the king of the 21st century of goaltending, and has also gone on now after retiring from his professional playing career to be a really popular broadcaster for NHL intermission reports with a lot of good insights and a very balanced approach. He has made some of the greatest saves of all time, leading the Rangers in all-time wins with 459 and shutouts with 64, while playing in an era of all-time greats such as Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, and Boston's famous perfection line of Bergeron, Pasternak, and Marchand. He finished his Rangers career with a 2.43 goals against average, a 918 save percentage. And Corey, in 15 seasons as a pro, he made a whopping 23,509 saves. This man, King Hank, they call him that for a reason because he is king of all the stats. He was an absolute machine and made some of the craziest saves I have ever seen. Please just go look them up on YouTube. I can't describe them or give them all enough credit. And like the Flower, maybe not as well known, he really is a good personality, a really level-headed dude, and someone that should be inspired and look up to by all goaltenders as they look to grow and potentially become an NHL star. In fact, also just a fun note, while we don't see this necessarily so much anymore, he actually started in 60 plus games, again, up to 82. He started in 60 plus of them in the regular season for 9 of those 15 seasons he played, including starting in over 70 games for 3 of those seasons. And in fact, prior to winning the Vezina Trophy in 2012, he was nominated in each of his first 3 seasons. That is something very rare to have happen. And he is actually the only goaltender in NHL history to record 11 30-win seasons in his first 12 seasons as a professional. I mean, Corey, I would love to give you a chance to talk about King Hank as well. So I'm just going to finish this by saying he was one of my favorite players to watch as a child and helped me to grow my love of the sport. I absolutely loved watching the Rangers, would root for him just because I was rooting for Hank. My dad being a goaltender, he always looked up to Henrik, and I always have as well. So I really think he's just a great personality. Maybe not as fun and out there as Fleury is, but just as impactful to the game in the 21st century.
Well, he's also just very handsome. But
Yeah, we can't all be born with that beauty that the man has.
he is a Swede, so there's that. But I mean, talk about overcoming adversity. I believe the documentary is already out, but it's all about him finding out that he has heart issues that basically will end and did end his playing career. And it's a shame because I think he did still have more to give, more that he wanted to play, but his body genuinely would not allow him to do it. And it's a real shame, but I think he accepted it with grace, even though he never got to lift Lord Stanley. Although it would not surprise me if one day he gets the chance to do so as a coach, much like Roberto Luongo got the chance to. So it is a shame that he never got to do it as a player, but he was actually, I don't know if a lot of people know, a lot like Nathan MacKinnon. He was the ultimate competitor. Henrik Lundqvist loved to win and he hated to lose even more. And I mean, seeing him face down after Alec Martinez got the double overtime goal on him in 2014 when the Rangers made it to the final against the Kings is one of the saddest photos you will ever see. I mean, he was so close and yet so far. So, nothing but love for King Henrik. And yeah, that's
Yeah,
all I have to
I would
say.
just say that he was a true hero story from humble origin as well. He had a sad end and it was forced out of the NHL, but again, like you said, Corey, not of his own choosing. But he was actually not some first round draft pick. He was drafted
No.
in the 200s. So he was one of those late round success stories who really just outworked everybody and turned into an absolute superstar. And like I said, in my opinion, one of the 5 greatest goalies of all time. So really can't say enough about him. And I hope that even if it's not coaching, maybe he would be a good GM or something. I agree. I would love to see him be able to hoist the cup in one way or another.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'll do kind of a twofer as we start to move into the twilight of this segment, and then your final hero here. I have some players that it might be contentious to maybe call them heroes, but the one I want to highlight, of course, did you all think I'd get through this section without mentioning at least a former Avalanche player, Nazem Kadri? Now Nazem Kadri had a very contentious career, particularly with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He had some less than stellar performances and even suspensions in playoffs in years prior, and was blamed when he was with the Avs the year they won the cup for injuring Jordan Binnington, even though it was absolutely Jordan Binnington's own teammate, and you can see it in the video, who injures Binnington and shoves Kadri into him. You can fight me on that all day, Blues fans. The evidence is literally right fucking there. But obviously, hockey fans did not, and Blues fans, I know this does not represent all of you, jokes aside, did not take kindly to that. And Nazem Kadri was the subject to a lot of racist and hateful attacks on social media, online. He had to be escorted by private security to the game right after in St. Louis because they were worried due to threats on his life, which is just absolutely fucking ridiculous. At the end of the day, hockey is still a game, and for people to take it that far is just completely unnecessary. But I think Kadri rose above that, and he demonstrated that with his actions on the ice. He didn't need to respond with any words, but instead responded with his play, which is how I always think you should do it. And he scored a hat trick the very next game to help propel the Avalanche to another win over the St. Louis Blues that would put them one step closer to winning the series. Not only that, but he was targeted by Evander Kane later in those playoffs on the Edmonton Oilers, who then cross-checked him and broke his thumb. Kadri overcame that too, and again showed up with his actions and scored the OT winner in Game 3 against Andrei Vasilevsky. No one even knew the puck went in. And to his credit, at the very end when he won the cup, he said, "Anybody who thought I was a liability can kiss my ass." And I completely agree with what he said. He was the first Muslim-born player to win the Stanley Cup, and he brought it to his mosque and really showed out in his community. And I think that's really important to show kids like that, other Muslim kids, that you can also be a hockey superstar and you can have an impact on the ice like Nazem Kadri.
Yeah, I think he's one of those players who is, I think, an absolute success story, like you said. But in the hockey world, especially with rivalries as they are, it's hard for most players not to be mired by controversy and be those otherworldly individuals we talk about that are so well liked all around the league. So I think that's is very fair to add him as a hero, Corey, and I think he certainly is a hero for how he has responded to the adversity he's faced.
The other player I'd like to briefly highlight is actually the most famous rat in Brad Marchand. He is a villain on the ice, but he is a hero off of it. Similar to what, oh my God, Rain, Patrice Bergeron did. Brad Marchand makes a big impact with those who are mentally challenged, have Down syndrome, autism, all those kinds of things. He goes out of his way to make connections with people in that community. I don't know if he does what Patrice Bergeron did. I would imagine that he did because he was very heavily involved with Patrice Bergeron, where there's a box rented out every game for people who are of that status. So Brad Marchand does a lot of really good work with that off of the ice, and I just wanted to highlight that. So, asshole on the ice. God damn it, he's a good person off the ice.
Really, really great human, absolute rat on the ice, actually biting an ear, and licking people's faces, among other things, like a rat actually would. So quite the polarizing player, to say the least. But really funny and a great personality for Team Canada during the Four Nations as well, I would like to add.
I can't lie, he's very funny, and it pisses me off. Anyway, Dom, who is your final hero?
Well, we've highlighted most of the teammates, so just as a hint, this is another Boston Bruin, and I know that's hard for us both to be able to recognize some of the great players they have from their, well, I don't know if it's a dynasty, but from their great run of success here. In fact, there were only 3 players named to the all-decade team for both the 2000s and the 2010s. Those first two being Crosby and Ovechkin, and I believe Ovechkin should be considered an honorable mention as well for his ability in the game, his goal-scoring talent. The fact that he is closing in on the Gretzky record is nothing short of spectacular, though he has had his moments where he is physical and could be considered on the wrong side of this as a villain by many fans and many franchises. But no, the third player to make those lists is actually Zdeno Chara. The former Bruins captain was one of the critical players that fueled Boston's run of success. He stood taller than most players in the NHL at 6'9" and could hit with the
What do you mean
best
stood
of them.
taller than
However,
most? Stood taller than all. I think he is the tallest player in history.
uh, possibly, yeah, that's probably accurate. I feel like there's got to be taller now, but you're probably right. I didn't actually look up to confirm. I just know he was 6'9", and I remember him standing above
It is
everyone.
Zdeno Chara.
Um,
I looked it up.
anyway,
It is him.
it's Zdeno Chara. Okay, it is him. So he stood taller than any other player in NHL history. Thank you for correcting me, Corey. However, unlike Tom Wilson, Chara was actually known for following the hockey code often and often fighting in response to dirty or big hits instead of being the instigator of dirty play. Nonetheless, pardon me, he was an absolutely talented fighter and not afraid to throw his weight around when checking. But he was also more than just an enforcer, playing consistent defense both with great hands, skating ability, and a powerful shot throughout his entire career. He provided some of the best examples of when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, with Chara backing down to no man and being that immovable object. League heavyweights such as Pat Maroon, Matt Martin, and even Alex Ovechkin have tried to hit him and found themselves on the receiving end of a powerful counter check. Or when they tried to challenge him to a fight, his weight and height advantage was always noticeable, making him truly a one of a kind player and a hero to his franchise. And I think when he had such that big advantage in size over everyone, but also the talent to go with it, he did a great job of not necessarily abusing that and really sticking to the hockey code, like I said, really fighting in defense of his teammates rather than being the instigator. So that is why I wanted to call out Chara and recognize him as a hero. Like you mentioned, Corey, I would just like to say there are plenty of Sharks that are heroes to me, and I would like to just honorable mention to Patrick Marleau and Joe Thornton. Jumbo Joe are retired unit jerseys up in the rafters. Both deserve to be there and are heroes to my franchise. And of course, Joe Pavelski for what he did during his time with the team and his time as captain. But sorry, going back to Chara though, anything you would like to add before we close out this? This has been a wonderful segment, Corey. I'm glad we finally got to do heroes and villains.
Absolutely. And I'd love to do maybe a part two, because there are definitely plenty of other players who fit the mold for both. So if anybody out there, whether you listen to this episode tomorrow or today, I guess on Thursday, or far in the future when you're revisiting old episodes, if you have some heroes or villains that you think we should highlight, send them our way and we'll pick out some that we think are also, I think, acceptable to the molds, especially those heroes. We want to know who you think are the heroes of the NHL and why. Give us a good reason why, because I think the villains are a lot easier to identify. So definitely throw some heroes our way. We want to know who you think are your heroes. But I mean, if you got that good villain, can't deny it. You gotta throw it that way. But otherwise, for Big Z, definitely the one guy who knew how to use his size properly most of the time, unlike some people today. Matt Rempe.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, that should be an honorable mention, or I assume that's who you were pointing to take Tom Wilson's crown because he clearly is got his
Indeed.
eyes set on it because that's the only thing he can ever seem to do.
Indeed. Well, anything else in this lovely segment before we kind of wrap up here?
No, please do lead us out here, Corey. Thank you again, everyone, for listening to Heroes and Villains. I hope you liked it, and yeah, comment below if you'd like to hear a part two, and if you do have some of those heroes, because I know we are trying to bring hockey, and for some of you who are newer fans. Who are some of the players that you found on your own that inspire you? They can be current players. They
Yeah.
don't have to be players of the past decade or the past century. Tell we would love to know who inspires you and really makes you enjoy the game of hockey. That would mean the most to us so that we could actually appreciate that and appreciate what brought you to the game.
Absolutely. Well, Dom, I'm sorry to say, but I think we were very involved in our Four Nations discussion, which I think is totally okay. But we've run out of time for your power rankings this week. But I don't think anything wrong with carving out some time for them next week. I'll be interested, since we really won't have any games either way up until that point. So I think we'll carve out some time for your pre-trade deadline power rankings next week. So everybody keep an eye and ear out for those. But without further ado, we'll move into our four players of the week. For Sweden, my player is going to be actually Samuel Ersson, who, despite not so great play with the Philadelphia Flyers, found a way to be the guy that handed the USA their first loss of this tournament. So credit goes to Ersson. I'm sure Tortorella was sitting on the US bench, very upset, wondering where this play has been the entire time. For Finland, it's pretty obvious. For me, it has to be Mikael Granlund. Not only did he get the clutch goal OT winner against their rival Sweden, but scored two back-to-back to bring Finland within one of the Canadians, and maybe would have even gotten a third if Sidney Crosby had not blown him out of his skates at center ice. For the USA, it's going to be Zach Werenski, who actually leads the team in scoring, just like how he leads his native Columbus Blue Jackets in scoring. He also leads his own squad as a defenseman in scoring, truly having a Norris caliber season. I have to give a lot of credit to Zach Werenski and everything he's doing this year. And of course, for Canada, Sidney Crosby, who, despite the fact that Nathan McKinnon scoring goals, Connor McDavid scoring goals, Sidney Crosby is an ageless wonder. He is truly Jesus in Canadian clothing. I mean, you can't really pick anybody else. He's also leading the Canadians in scoring with 5 points in this tournament. I think it's about time that he finally gets a goal of his own that's not an empty netter. So we will keep an eye out in tomorrow's game. Dom, any thoughts?
I mean, I just would like to say you're absolutely right. Ersson has he had a stellar game, was really recognized for that. He did a great job against everything the U.S. could throw at him. So tip my cap to him. I don't need any excuse to hype up Granlund, and Crosby is one of the greatest of all time. But I would like to take a moment and say Werenski has been flying under the radar, but he is the reason the Blue Jackets are competitive right now. Well, not solely, no one person can do it alone, but he is seriously really good, and is just, again, flying under the radar based on it being a smaller market team. So when we talk all this about Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, this guy is lurking, waiting for one of them to slip up, and so he can take the mantle. So I definitely think he should be a finalist this year, if nothing else, for the Norris.
And I think he will, without a doubt. Everyone, Dom, listeners, this week, I have failed you. I do not have a fun fact for you, nor did I want to scramble to find some bullshit one while we were sitting here having our discussion. One, because I wanted to be involved in the discussion, and two, because of the Four Nations, I wanted to have something relevant to that. Wayne Gretzky talks about the World Cup of Hockey a lot in his book, 99 Stories of the Game. So I want to pull one from that specifically. Unfortunately, this week has just been weighing on me heavily, so I'm sorry, everyone. You are without your fun fact this week, but I will make up for it with an utterly fantastic one next week, plus a bonus. So I will make sure that you have 2 fun facts next week, not just one. But I apologize, everyone. I do not have a fun fact for you this week.
Well, to be fair, I think with our heroes and villains segment, we pulled out some pretty fun facts
You're
about
right.
some of these great players. So I think it is everyone out there, don't be too hard. Just like we say about the players on the ice, please be nice to my good friend and co-host here, Corey. He does follow through on his promises. So I'm looking forward to the fun fact next week just as much as all of you.
Me too. Yeah, I've followed through with like one promise with the podcast. Oh yeah, I'll do the segment next week. Never happens. Yeah, so that's me. Anyways, everyone, the clock is counting down to the final horn. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode of the Captain Avalanche Fancast. Did you know there is a comment section where you can leave your thoughts and questions? If you have something you want to know about the Avalanche, Sharks, or just hockey in general, leave it below and we'll be happy to try and answer it. There is also a unique poll for you to interact with every episode. The best thing you can do if you like what we're doing here is to follow us on whatever platform you're using and share this podcast everywhere you can, whether that's with your mouse or your mouth. I'm Captain Avalanche Corey.
This is Dom from the Tank.
Check out our new episodes every week. Thanks, everyone.